Hi folks, and welcome back. I thought I'd put together a little mini series which I'm going to call From Box to Base. If you remember from my last painting up bench update, I mentioned about doing some grens from beginning to end, so I thought I'd make a start. And what we're looking at are the contents of 3 boxes from the Perry Miniatures grens range. You've got the AN20, which is their command, AN21, which is their marching, and AN32, which is the grens skirmishing. And take a closer look at some of the moulds. Very nice as always, nice animation of the figures. So yeah, once again, one of the skirmishers. Very nice. So the idea of this series, as I say, is to basically give tips and helpful hints to beginners and veterans alike, really, if there's anything that comes up that might be handy for those that have been painting for many years. Don't profess to be the world's best painter, but I always enjoy painting figures, and so I like to help out any way I can to any beginners. So the raw materials, the miniatures themselves. We have, let's take this guy here for example. What we mean by starting the process is cleaning the figure up. What we mean by that is we're looking for any mould lines, usually found along down the side of the legs, inside the legs, top of the shoulders, down the arms, things like that. Worms and things, which are these funny little lines which appear all over the models. They all need to be removed, as well as the mould lines. And also, last but not least, these casting pegs, as I call them, just one of the processes of moulding figures. All these can be removed with a sharp knife, although I tend to remove the what I call pegs with a pair of clippers, basically. I don't like using a knife because it just means that you can break the model. So a little snip off and then a clean up with a model knife is a safer way of doing it. As I say, you don't want to break these guys. They are sometimes a little brittle. Those pegs are there for a reason, because in the casting, obviously this thing sticking out here will more than likely break in the process of casting. So there you go. Once you've got your model cleaned up, I'll do that later. Once you've got the model cleaned up, it's now looking at the first process, which is undercoating. I use grey undercoat. If the weather permits it, I spray, and for that I usually use a car spray paint, which is I usually buy from Halfords, which is a well-known brand over here in the UK. I'm not quite sure what the equivalent is in the US and elsewhere, but if it's the weather's not good for spraying, which is pretty often here in the UK, you then paint them on. And I use Army Painter Ash Grey. It's a nice light grey, good coverage. Obviously you've got to water it down 50-50 because you don't want to lose any of the detail. You just brush it on with a nice medium-sized brush, giving him a good coat all over. If you're not satisfied with the first coat, you can go for a second coat. Don't be tempted to slap it on really hard, really thick though, because you could lose some of the detail. And one thing I forgot to mention, of course, is obviously you don't want to be touching the figure while you're painting him, so I tend to stick him onto a plastic top like this, and for that I use good old Yoo-hoo glue. I use this because I've made mistakes before with sticking them on with plastic cement glue that you use for making plastic models. Great stuff, but it doesn't like letting go of the model at the end of it when you're finished, and you end up having to fight him to get him off the top. So the little tip there, use some handy Yoo-hoo. The next part of the process is the composition of what I'm going to do. For me, I always like painting big bases. I just like the fun of making a little bit of a diorama, a little bit of a story to each of my bases. So we'll have a quick look at that now. And so, composition. This is one of my large bases. It's 15 centimeters by 8 centimeters in depth, and there before you have 16 of the Grens. Just a nice sort of composition. There's a bit of fluidity at the front of the line with the guys loading, sergeants and things, marching guys at the back, standard bearer and the sapper at the back. I also like to add a little bit at the front as well, so what I was thinking was actually maybe throwing out one of the guys shooting, and even a dead Frenchman as well on the front as well. Might change as these things do. I might end up with both the guys at the front firing. Not quite sure yet, but that's the basic idea of the composition. You know, you have a little bit of a look around, see what figures you've got, marry them up together so they look as if they're interacting. This guy here sort of looking in this direction, looking at the sergeant, shouting at him. These guys are here busily concentrating, loading and things like that. So it's always good to have a little bit of a story with the figures. Anything that's left over, you can always singularly base them and use them for skirmish games and things like that. You know, you always keep all the things handy that you get within the box, particularly the plastic stuff as well. Obviously, stuff off the sprue, just put it in a box and keep it handy, because you never know what you're going to get and where you're going to use it. Obviously, this guy here is an example. This came out of the Perry plastic Dragoon set, I think it was. Obviously, keep hold of him. He came in handy eventually. Things like that. So that's the sort of the composition part. The last bit of the process before the painting really starts, obviously, is to do a little bit of reference, a little bit of research of what you're actually painting. So I'll pause here for a bit and I'll show you what I mean. And yeah, reference books. This one here, Napoleonic uniforms of the Napoleonic Wars. This is a page on Border Grens, gives you a bit of information, gives you the idea of what they look like. They generally either wore white or this darkish brown uniform jackets, always with the blue trousers. As I say, books are always a good reference. Once again, rules supplements always come in handy as well. Reference another Austrian Grens regiment, again, dark brown jackets, blue trousers, this time with white webbing instead of the black. Again, I think pretty much everyone uses what they can find, and but if books aren't available, obviously Google the subject always comes in handy as well. There's plenty of pictures on Google of Austrian Grens, be them pictures or even photos of other Wargamers units as well. So that's the basics and startup. So I'm going to leave the video here, and I'll come back in part 2 where I'll go through the painting process that I use. Hopefully this has been helpful. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch, and any questions, leave them in the messages and I'll get back to you. But as always, bye for now.